So this is to me the real challenge is what are we going to do, and how are we going to go from the situation we have now to improve it? And I don't think we can do it unless we have this understanding of what liberty is, and that you have to reject force. You can't force people what to do. Now, some people argue, well, you should have a little bit of force because there's always people going to fall through the crack, and therefore a little force to transfer wealth and get into the wealth transfer business, that is necessary. And then some others will say, well, we can't trust people with making their own decisions. I had one congressman tell me, when I challenged him on a vote he was taking, I said, why don't you just let the people make these decisions? And it was just a casual conversation sitting on the floor. He says, people are too stupid. He felt like he had to take care of the people, and the world that I foresee in a free society is far from perfect, but the one I see right now is much, much further from perfect. But this whole idea that governments can do this, either economically or individually, this assumes that the government, if they can tell you about economics and redistribute wealth and economic planning and print the money and all these things, then there's another group will say, well, I don't like the way that people do it. They spend their money on gambling. They sit around and they waste their time, and they don't read the right books, and they put stuff in their mouth and in their lungs and in their bodies that they shouldn't be doing, and it's only the government, us wise protectors in Washington, can tell you what to do. And I've just taken the position that we don't need government for that. A lot of people say, a lot of people who argue about sort of getting rid of some of those laws, what they argue is, you're endorsing what they do. Let's say you were in California and they're getting ready to vote on this marijuana law, which is irrelevant since almost half the people out there smoke marijuana anyway. So they come along and they say, we need to tell people what to do. But we generally accept the idea that our soul, our religious values, the government's not supposed to mess around with, and that's a pretty important function. It might be the most important function of our life. And then we don't interfere with what we put into our minds. We are pretty lenient on teaching, and our universities have all kinds of challenging ideas, religion and what we put in our minds. And I just think that what we put in our mouths and put in our hearts, and the whole thing should be up to the individual. But that doesn't work either if individuals are totally irresponsible, or if they think that, well, okay, I strayed, I smoked too much, I got lung cancer, I'm sick, therefore, the people who took care of themselves, you're responsible to take care of me. See, I don't quite buy that. It does not mean that I'm not a humanitarian, and not mean that I don't have the compassion that drove me into medicine, because I think that's very important. But voluntary compassion is a lot different than compulsory compassion by the government. So if we had a free society, and people could force their neighbor to take care of them because of their bad habits. Maybe they gambled too much or didn't work hard enough. I mean, the next person shouldn't be forced to take care of them. But you say, well, there's still going to be a lot of problems. People are going to be sick and they lose their jobs, and people incapable. And I think that is true. But a truly compassionate society, a true compassion would, have people that would be a moral society and compassionate society, but a lot of people don't have the belief that could possibly work. And yet, when it has been tried, generally it has worked, imperfectly. But what I fear so much is when we shift over, once we grant the principle in saying that, well, we need government for 10% of the people. Well, if you say that, why don't we have it for 11% of the people or 12% of the people? And then there becomes a dependency, and before you know it, the cost of it is outrunning the amount of money that we have, and that's where we are today. We can't sustain this. So whether it's trying to take care of people economically or trying to instruct them how to run their personal lives, or embarking on what we have done now since World War II is inheriting an empire and building on it. We inherited the British Empire, took it over after the British went bankrupt, after 2 world wars set them back. And so we've inherited an empire, but did we just inherit it for a short time? No. I mean, we have really taken over. We constantly expand. It's all built on militarism. I mean, when I was in high school, the North Koreans invaded South Korea. And I remember one of my teachers had been in World War II, was drafted, and he didn't come back home. And that had a lot of effect on me on what this all means, especially as I got older and realized that war shouldn't even have been fought. I finally read the Constitution. It says the Congress is supposed to declare it, and we went in under a UN resolution, and we're still over there. We lost 38,000 there. Then we had to Vietnam. We lost 60,000. No declaration of war. And yet it was always to protect our interests. So we've done that. So just think of what's happened since we've left Vietnam. Very humiliating circumstances. We now trade with Vietnam. They have become westernized. This whole theory, the domino theory, if Vietnam fell, the whole Southeast Asia would go communist. Well, they became westernized, and they have done very well. And we visit there, invest there. Their president comes over here. So much more has been achieved in peace than was achieved in war. And at the same time, the Chinese, there's a big war going on in Washington against the Chinese. Everybody has to have a battle. Right now, it's all the Chinese' fault because they have a trade surplus and we have a negative trade balance with them. But maybe we spend too much money. Maybe we have a currency that they've allowed us to print. If we're printing gold and they'll take our money, why wouldn't we be spending money over there? And it's an imbalance, and it's back to the currency thing. If you didn't have this currency system, that wouldn't work. But we have never given up on the militarism. We assume that, we might need oil. Remember the Persian Gulf War in '90? That was for jobs and to protect our oil. And we've been protecting our oil ever since. And we're in so many countries over there. But what have the Chinese been doing? Working hard, saving their money. They have $2 trillion in savings in China, over $1 trillion of our dollars and $1 trillion of others. And they just can't be they just can't be very good capitalists. They're communists. But what do? They're investing around the world. They're buying up oil interests here. It looks like they're going to be partners in a business here in Texas. Oh, it's the Chinese. We got to stomp them. Well, how did they get their dollars? Did we have any responsibility whatsoever? They get a lot of money because we buy stuff from them. But what do they do with the money? They invest it or they loan it back to us. They bought all these treasury bills and all these Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. All they did was they became a participant in the bubble. The bubble was caused by our programs of insisting banks make bad loans. At the same time, the Fed kept creating money out of thin air and having artificially low interest rates. And then China actually added on to that by buying some of that up. But my point being is that I don't like our militarism. China is not a militaristic country. They are not known for, always spreading their borders around. Historically, they've had on occasion, but basically, they're not invading other countries, certainly not now. But they're invading other countries by just spending their money. That seems to be a lot wiser move. That sounds like something America did 50, 60, 70 years ago. We were the capitalists, and we had a positive trade balance, and we loaned people money, and we invested around the world. And we have gotten, pretty fat and happy and think that this was going to last forever, and it didn't, and it's come to an end. And I think it's because we don't have an understanding of what kind of a government we should have. I don't believe we should be the policemen of the world. I don't think it's part of the Constitution. There's no authority for it. I think it's unwise because we make more enemies than friends, and it costs us a lot of money and drives us to our bankruptcy. And empires always end. They always end badly, and usually not by a military defeat. Soviet system wasn't defeated militarily. When I was drafted in the 60s, that was the height of the Cold War. And they had like 30, 40,000 warheads and missiles. I mean, it was a dangerous time. But we never had to fight the Soviets. The Soviets finally crumbled, as Mises, the great Austrian economist, predicted. He said, socialism doesn't work. They don't have a pricing structure. And the whole system doesn't work. And if you have artificial money and fixed interest rates and central economic planning, it always fails, and we have that. So I actually sincerely believe that we will have a disintegration of our system. The worldwide system, we cannot maintain it. And when the country recognizes how severely broke we are, we're not going to be able to take care of a lot of people at home. But I advocate stopping the spending immediately. I would say that we ought to have a balanced budget, and as quickly as possible. And people say, well, where are you going to cut? And I would say, well, cut overseas. I mean, how long do you want troops in Korea? How long do you think you have to pay to have troops in Germany? How long do you want to expand the war constantly in the Middle East? First, it's Iraq, who had no weapons of mass destruction, where there was no Al-Qaeda, had nothing to do with 9/11, so we invade them after 9/11. Guess what? Guess what's going on in Iraq now? They have a Shiite government that looks like the coalition is going to hold up, friendly to the Iranians. Before, we had that guy that you can't defend, Saddam Hussein, but he was more tolerant to Christians than the government we have over there now, because all the Christians left Iraq. The Al-Qaeda is back in Iraq, or they never were in Iraq, even with Saddam Hussein. They have come into Iraq, and we have removed a balance of power between Iraq and Iran. And so now I see that all that work and effort, tragically, it looks like we've delivered the Iraqi system to the Iranians. Because I don't think we have the energy, the determination, the finances to take on the Iranians. And there are people in Washington that want to, but we don't need that. I mean, we don't need it for moral reasons, constitutional reasons, economic reasons, practical reasons. And the sooner we wake up, the better.